Welcome back to another deep dive. Today we're engaging in a bit of time travel.
Oh, I love a good time travel segment.
Right. We are going back to an era where, flannel was in, the internet was just this weird novelty, and television was, well, it was this massive singular campfire that the whole country basically gathered around.
The monoculture.
Exactly, the monoculture. We are looking specifically at the 1994 to 1995 television season.
Which is, it's a completely pivotal year in pop culture history. You had the launch of Friends, you had ER, just entirely changing the drama landscape.
Yeah.
But amidst all that new blood, you had a show entering its second year that decided it wasn't just going to survive, it was going to completely dominate.
And we are, of course, talking about season 2 of Frasier.
Frasier Crane.
Now, usually when we talk about TV history on this show, we obsess over pilots, that first spark.
Or we argue about finales.
Right, the finale. But the second season is arguably the most dangerous time for a show.
Yeah.
It's the prove it year.
It's the filter. Really. In the industry, they call it the sophomore slump.
The dreaded sophomore slump.
Yeah, and the idea is that you have your whole entire life to write your first album, or in this case, your first season of TV. You pour every single good idea you've ever had into those first 24 episodes.
Because you just want to stay on the air.
Exactly. Then suddenly you're on a deadline, the novelty has completely worn off, and you have to do it again. But better.
Which is where most shows just stumble.
They rehash old jokes, or they try to change way too much, way too fast.
But looking at the stack of research we have for you today, production notes, the ratings archives, all the critical reviews, season 2 of Frasier didn't just avoid the slump. It honestly seems like they didn't even know the slump existed.
They ignored it entirely.
This season, which ran from September 20th, 1994 to May 23rd, 1995 on NBC, is often cited by critics as literally one of the most perfect seasons of sitcom television ever produced.
Because it's the season where the show figured out exactly what it was. It stopped being, just a spinoff of Cheers and really started being the Frasier that we all know and love.
Now, before we get into the heavy analysis of the writing and those amazing farce mechanics, I want to start with something small.
Okay.
It's this visual detail I found in the production notes. So if you go back and watch season 1, the opening title card, that iconic line drawing of the Seattle skyline?
The one with the little animated elevator or the lights?
Yeah, that one. In season 1, it was a bit all over the place. It was blue, it was yellow, sometimes orange. They were definitely just testing the waters.
Right. They were still iterating on the branding, seeing what stuck.
But in season 2, they made a very specific choice. The title card goes red, and it stays red.
It's a subtle shift, but semiotically, it's huge.
How so?
Well, in design language, red is aggressive. It's bold. It completely demands your attention. So changing the branding to a consistent, bold red signals confidence. It basically tells the viewer, we aren't experimenting anymore. We know who we are. Sit down and watch.
And people really did watch.
Yeah.
Which brings me to the mission of this deep dive for you listening. We aren't just here to recount funny jokes. We are trying to actually understand how this specific season cemented the show's legacy.
So we're looking at the mechanics of the farce.
Yes, the farce. The integration of the Cheers history, which was a massive risk.
Huge risk.
And a guest caller list that is frankly insane.
But we have to start with the sheer scale of the success. Just the footprint of it.
The numbers. I was looking at the Nielsen ratings for this season, and my jaw hit the floor. Because we live in a world now where if a show gets, say, 3 or 4 million viewers on a streaming platform, it's a massive hit.
Oh yeah, 4 million is a cultural phenomenon today. They'll greenlight 3 spin-offs for 4 million.
Okay, so keep that in mind. In season 2 of Frasier, there's an episode we're going to discuss later called The Show, where Sam shows up. It pulled in 26.4 million viewers in the United States alone.
26.4 million.
It's absurd.
That is Super Bowl territory in the modern era. That is a number that simply does not exist in scripted television anymore because the audience is just so fragmented now. But back then, Frasier was operating on a level of monoculture dominance that is genuinely hard to even comprehend.
And the craziest part is it wasn't just the big stunt episodes that did those numbers. Even a standard, totally middle-of-the-road episode like The Botched Language of Cranes, which is literally just Frasier making a stupid mistake on the radio, drew 23.8 million people.
Just for a regular Tuesday night.
Exactly. They were consistently the #1 or #2 show in the weekly rankings.
Think about what that actually means, though. You have 24 million everyday people tuning in to watch 2 Jungian psychiatrists drink sherry, discuss opera, and quote Gilbert and Sullivan.
Right. On paper, this show should have been so niche.
It should have been strictly for the highbrow crowd, the PBS crowd. But the absolute genius of season 2 was proving that highbrow characters could have massive lowbrow appeal if the writing was sharp enough.
It's that perfect mix of high and low that totally defines the show, and the industry definitely rewarded it. The award sweep for this season is just a laundry list of gold statues.
It really was the Triple Crown, effectively. They won the Primetime Emmy for Outstanding Comedy Series in 1995.
Which is the big one.
Right, that's the Academy saying, you are the best. But they also won the Producers Guild of America Award.
Which, if you know the industry, is often a harder nut to crack because that's the money people. That's the people who actually physically make television saying, we respect how you're producing this.
And they took the TCA award, the Television Critics Association. So you have the critics, the producers, and the Academy all in complete alignment.
Which never happens.
That kind of consensus is incredibly rare. Usually, the critics love some weird indie show, and the public loves the broad multicam comedy. Frasier Season 2 was the Venn diagram overlap of literally everything.
But awards and ratings are just the result. We need to talk about the cause. What was actually happening on screen that made this work so flawlessly. I think we had to start with the ensemble.
Absolutely, because Season 1 established the basic archetypes. Frasier is the pompous one.
Niles is the fussier one.
Martin is the regular guy dad. Daphne is the quirky psychic. Roz is the cynical producer.
But Season 2 is where they break those flat archetypes and start building actual three-dimensional people.
Let's focus on Niles first, because I really feel like Season 2 is the Niles Crane breakout year.
It 100% is. The writers realized that David Hyde Pierce was this physical comedy genius. He's almost like a silent film star living in the 90s.
Buster Keaton in a bespoke suit.
Exactly. And they gave him material that really leaned into that. The episode that everyone always points to here is Flower Child.
An absolute classic.
The premise is so simple. It honestly sounds like a high school improv game. Niles witnesses a birth, gets totally freaked out about his own mortality and his lack of a legacy, and decides to see if he's actually ready for fatherhood.
But because he's Niles, he doesn't babysit a human.
No.
He adopts a sack of flour.
It's a sack of flour, and it sounds ridiculous. Man carries a bag of flour. But let's actually analyze the mechanics of why this works so well.
It works because Niles takes it 100% seriously.
No.
He projects all of his insecurities, all of his deep loneliness, and all of his repressed love onto this completely inanimate baking ingredient.
There's that incredible physical comedy sequence where he's trying to be so gentle with it, but he keeps almost destroying it. He drops it. He bumps its head.
It perfectly highlights his clumsiness in the real physical world. But then there's the emotional payoff.
Oh, the turn.
That turn is the secret sauce of Frasier. At the end of the episode, the sack rips. Now, a lesser show would just have him say, oh, well, back to the bakery. But Niles is totally devastated.
He really is.
He looks at this pile of white powder on the floor, and he isn't seeing flour. He is seeing his own utter inability to protect something he cares about.
It's actually heartbreaking.
It creates a moment of genuine pathos. It tells the audience, yes, this man is a total snob. Yes, he is ridiculous, but he has a massive heart that is currently breaking.
And that deeper layer is what kept 24 million people coming back every week. They weren't just laughing at him. They were rooting for him.
Speaking of rooting for Niles, we have to talk about the Daphne dynamic.
Oh, the unrequited love.
Exactly. That was established in Season 1, but Season 2 is where the tension actually starts to affect the household dynamics. It's where the boundaries get tested.
There's a very important episode called Daphne's Room. And this one is fascinating because it's not really about romance at all. It's about privacy.
Boundaries.
Right. Frasier goes into Daphne's room to get a book.
Which is a clear violation.
And then he goes back in to return some medicine. He just keeps crossing the threshold.
And Daphne explodes. And honestly, she should. This episode is so critical because it completely redefines Daphne's status in the house. In Season 1, you could argue she's just the help. She's an employee. But in Daphne's room, she asserts her rights as a resident. She forces Frasier, the man whose name is on the lease and pays her salary, to respect her space.
It completely shifts the power dynamic. If Daphne is just a servant, the jokes about her being eccentric feel a little like punching down. But if she is a powerful equal who can literally scream at Frasier and make him cower,
then the playing field is level. It allows the comedy to be much sharper.
And then you have those romantic undertones constantly simmering. We'll get to the matchmaker in the farce section, but that episode only works because we, the audience, know how desperately Niles loves her.
And how oblivious Frasier is to that dynamic.
Exactly. Let's pivot to the other main relationship in the core cast. Frasier and Martin, the father and son.
The central conflict of the entire series. The Ivy League versus the Police League.
By season 2, they've thankfully moved past the initial, I can't believe we lived together shock. Now they are genuinely trying to find common ground.
And it usually goes terribly wrong.
It really does. But the attempt is what matters. Take the episode Breaking the Ice.
Oh, the ice fishing episode.
Just the visual is funny. You have Frasier and Niles dressed in designer thermal wear, looking like they're about to go on a very expensive expedition to the North Pole.
While sitting in a tiny wooden shack with Martin, who is just drinking a regular beer in a flannel shirt.
It's a massive clash of aesthetics. But deeper than that, it's a clash of emotional languages. Frasier is completely obsessed with having a quote-unquote breakthrough. He wants to verbally articulate his love.
He wants the scene from a movie where the father and son cry and hug.
I love you, Dad. I love you, son.
Exactly. But Martin is a glaring example of the silent generation. He shows love by spending time, by sharing a beer, by sitting in the freezing cold together for hours. Frasier totally fails to recognize that the act of fishing is the breakthrough.
It's that deep frustration of, why won't you speak my language, versus, why won't you listen to mine?
And then they beautifully flip the script in retirement is murder. In Breaking the Ice, Frasier tries to enter Martin's world. In Retirement is Murder, Frasier tries to bring Martin into his world.
Oh, the cold case. Martin has this old police file he never solved from years ago. A murder involving a circus performer, I think.
Right. And Frasier decides, I can solve this. I am an esteemed psychiatrist. I can build a flawless psychological profile of the killer.
And his arrogance is just palpable. He truly thinks his medical degree makes him a better homicide detective than his father, who did it for decades.
And for a while, the episode totally tricks you. They find a suspect. The profile fits perfectly. It looks like the Crane brothers have actually done it. They are celebrating their sheer intellectual superiority.
And then the twist.
The glorious twist. Frasier realizes that based on all the physical evidence, the actual culprit was a chimpanzee.
A literal chimp.
It completely undercuts the pretension. You cannot psychoanalyze a chimp. It's the show telling us that sometimes the world isn't complex and Freudian. Sometimes it's just chaotic and primal.
And it completely vindicates Martin's worldview, that street smarts, in reality, often trump high-minded theory.
Absolutely, and that chaotic element leads us perfectly into the next section. Because if there is one single word that defines Season 2 of Frasier, it is farce.
Yes, the farce. This is the season where they fully mastered the bedroom farce. Now, for our listeners who might not be huge theater nerds, how would you define farce in this specific context? How is it different from just a funny sitcom?
Well, a standard sitcom usually relies on what we call setup, punchline. You say something funny, the audience laughs. A farce is structural. It relies entirely on a comedy of errors. It requires multiple characters to have totally different sets of information, usually based on a huge misunderstanding.
And they're interacting in a confined space.
Right, with lots of doors, lots of entrances and exits.
It's really about the machinery of the plot.
Exactly. It's a clockwork mechanism. If one person enters the room 5 seconds too early, the entire joke fails. And Season 2 has what many critics consider the greatest farce episode in the history of American television.
Matchmaker.
The Matchmaker.
I rewatched this for the deep dive, and it is honestly astonishing how well it holds up. Let's break down the mechanics for the listener.
So, the setup. Frasier, being the absolute meddler that he is, decides Daphne is lonely. He finds the new station manager, Tom Duran, played brilliantly by Eric Lutz. Frasier thinks Tom is a great catch. Smart, successful, handsome.
So Frasier invites Tom over for dinner, but, and here is the key to the entire mechanism, he never explicitly says, I am setting you up with Daphne.
He uses incredibly vague language. He says things like, there's someone I'm dying for you to meet, or I think you two will really hit it off.
And the missing piece of information for Frasier is that Tom is gay.
Right. So Tom hears Frasier, a single, impeccably groomed man who loves opera and fine sherry, inviting him for an intimate private dinner. Tom naturally assumes Frasier's asking him out.
And meanwhile, Daphne assumes the dinner is strictly for business. And Niles assumes Frasier is just being a shameless social climber. Everyone is in the exact same room, essentially having 4 entirely different conversations.
The writing here is surgical. There is a scene involving a cigarette that is just, it's agonizingly funny. Tom pulls out a cigarette. Frasier, trying to be the perfect host to impress Tom for Daphne's sake, rushes over to light it for him. He stares very intensely into Tom's eyes. He is leaning way in.
Right, because from Frasier's perspective, he's just being incredibly polite. But from Tom's perspective, he is being actively seduced.
And then Niles walks in, and Niles sees this incredibly intimate moment between his brother and his boss, and adds his own wrong interpretation to the pile. It just builds and builds until the tension is completely unbearable.
And the climax, when the truth finally comes out, it's not malicious. That's what makes it work so well. No one is the bad guy. It's purely a massive failure of communication driven entirely by Frasier's hubris.
That is the Frasier formula in a nutshell. Hubris leads directly to humiliation.
Which is honestly the perfect tagline for another key farce episode from this season, The Innkeepers.
Oh, the restaurant episode.
This one is less about misunderstanding and a lot more about pure, unfiltered arrogance. Frasier and Niles hear that this old, historic Seattle restaurant is closing, so naturally, they decide to buy it themselves.
Because they eat at nice restaurants, so obviously they can run one. It's bulletproof logic.
It's the Dunning-Kruger effect in action. They assume their good taste is an adequate substitute for actual business acumen.
And the opening night is a disaster of biblical proportions. The chefs quit, the sprinklers go off.
And the Cherries Jubilee incident.
Oh, man. The visual of them trying to serve this flaming dessert while the fire sprinklers are literally raining down on them in the dining room, it's the ultimate punishment for their snobbery. It's the Cranes versus the real world, and the real world wins by a knockout.
There's one more episode in this farce category I really want to touch on because it brings in a totally different kind of insanity. The Candidate.
This is their foray into political satire.
Frasier decides to formally endorse a political candidate, Phil Patterson. He's the intellectual choice. Martin, of course, supports the other guy.
Frasier wants the high road. He wants the smart, sophisticated candidate.
But then Patterson privately confides in Frasier. He trusts him because he's a psychiatrist. And he reveals that he was, well, abducted by aliens.
It's such a massive left turn.
And you just watch Kelsey Grammer's face. He is totally stuck. He has publicly endorsed this man. He's on the television commercial. But the man genuinely believes he was on a spaceship.
It plays beautifully on the fear of the public secret. Frasier is trapped right between his ethics, patient confidentiality, and his reputation, which means endorsing a madman.
And he accidentally reveals it on air. He completely destroys the campaign with one slip of the tongue. It's a great commentary on just how fragile political images really are. One slip, one weird story, and it's over.
And again, it's Frasier trying to control the uncontrollable. Whether it's a restaurant, a dinner party, or a political campaign, he thinks he can steer the ship. And every single time, he crashes it right into the rocks.
Which transitions nicely to another episode about controlling the uncontrollable, the unkindest cut of all.
Ah, Eddie.
Right, a domestic dispute that just escalates. Eddie, Martin's dog, fathers a litter of puppies, and Frasier tries to arrange for Eddie to be neutered because Martin just flat out refuses to do it.
It's Frasier trying to exert control over nature, over this dog that he frankly despises, but he can't.
Now moving on. We cannot talk about Season 2 without addressing the giant, beer-swilling elephant in the room, the Cheers connection.
This was a really dangerous game for the Raiders. Season 1 worked so hard to distance itself from Cheers, they wanted to stand on their own 2 feet. But by Season 2, they finally felt confident enough to start bringing the old gang back.
But what I love is they didn't just do cheap cameos, they did really deep character work. The big one, obviously, is the show where Sam shows up.
Ted Danson returns.
And the ratings, as we mentioned earlier, were astronomical, 26.4 million. But watching it now, it's not just a happy reunion, it's actually kind of profoundly sad.
It really is. The dynamic has completely flipped. In Cheers, Sam was the cool one. He was the center of the world, and Frasier was just the weird, stuffy sidekick at the end of the bar. Now Frasier has the career, the fame, the beautiful apartment, the family, and Sam is still just Sam.
He's an aging playboy.
There's a real melancholy to Ted Danson's performance in this. He's still charming, obviously, but he feels a bit lost, and then the plot kicks in. Sam is getting married. He wants advice from his old psychiatrist buddy.
And Frasier realizes he has actually slept with Sam's fiancée, Sheila.
Played by Téa Leoni.
Yes, Téa Leoni. And it turns the reunion into a genuine ethical dilemma. It's super messy. It's not just pure fan service. It's a real test of their friendship. It forces them to be honest with each other in a way they maybe never were back at the bar in Boston.
And then, on the complete opposite end of the spectrum from Sad Sam, we have the return of the Ice Queen, Lilith.
Bebe Neuwirth. You honestly cannot tell the story of Frasier Crane without Lilith Sternin.
They bring her back in this massive two-part epic, Adventures in Paradise. Frasier is really trying to move on. He's dating a new woman, Madeline, played by JoBeth Williams. They go to Bora Bora. It's supposed to be incredibly romantic.
And in a moment of pure sitcom nightmare fuel, he wakes up, looks at the other bed in the romantic bungalow, and sees Lilith.
The scream.
The sheer horror on his face is unmatched.
It works so well because Lilith represents the baggage he simply can't leave behind. You can fly all the way to the South Pacific, but your past travels right with you. And the chemistry between Kelsey Grammer and Bebe Neuwirth is just electric. They snap at each other, they banter. You implicitly believe these two were married and tortured each other.
And there's a very special credit in that Bora Bora episode.
Ring.
Special appearance by Shelley Long.
Diane Chambers.
She appears in a dream sequence.
It completes the trifecta. You have Sam, Lilith, and Diane all haunting Frasier in this single season. The writers were using the dense history of Cheers not as a crutch, but as a legitimate way to psychoanalyze Frasier. These are the ghosts of his past relationships, and he has to confront them to actually move forward.
Moving from ghosts of the past to demons of the present, I want to talk about the Rogues Gallery. Season 2 introduced or fleshed out some of the absolute best antagonists in the show's entire run.
And at the very top of that list is Bebe Glazer,
Frasier's agent.
played by Harriet Sansom Harris. This character she is just delicious. She is pure id.
In the episode Agents in America, Part 3, Frasier wants a raise. The station says no, so he unleashes Bebe.
Bebe is the anti-Frasier. Frasier is totally obsessed with ethics and morality. Bebe has absolutely none. She is manipulative, she lies compulsively, she smokes like a chimney. She is essentially the devil in a pantsuit.
There's a real seduction element to it. Not sexual, really, but professional.
Yeah.
She seduces him with the promise of fame. I can make you a star, darling.
She represents the temptation of completely selling out. And watching Frasier, who prides himself on his steadfast integrity, get swept up in her chaos is completely fascinating. He hates her methods, but he absolutely loves the results.
When we have the bullies. This season really liked to remind the Crane boys that they are, at their core, physically weak. In Seat of Power, they hire a plumber.
Danny Kriesel, played by John C. McGinley.
Who turns out to be a childhood bully who used to mercilessly torment Niles.
It creates this intense regression. Frasier and Niles are highly successful, wealthy men in expensive suits. But the moment this guy walks into the apartment with a wrench, they immediately revert to being scared little boys.
It really grounds them. It reminds us that their high status is incredibly fragile.
And we see a totally different kind of bullying in Roz in the doghouse. Bulldog, the sports host at the radio station, tries to poach Roz.
And Frasier insults Roz, basically implying she's only getting the job offer because Bulldog wants to sleep with her. Which is a terrible thing to say.
It is. It's totally sexist and dismissive of her talent, and Roz quits.
But then Bulldog actually does try to sleep with her.
Which puts Frasier in a huge bind. He was right about Bulldog's intentions, but he was entirely wrong to say it the way he did. He has to actually swallow his massive pride and apologize to Roz to get her back. It solidifies their loyalty. It shows that Frasier values Roz way more than his own ego. Eventually...
And one more rogue before we move on. The thief.
Yeah.
Nathan Lane.
Oh, this is a gem. Fool me once, shame on you.
Nathan Lane plays a con man who steals Frasier's briefcase. And because Frasier literally keeps his entire life in that bag, the guy basically steals his identity.
And when Frasier finally catches him, instead of calling the cops, what does he do?
He tries to treat him.
He tries to psychoanalyze the criminal while the criminal is actively robbing him again.
Why do you feel the need to steal? Let's unpack this.
It is the ultimate expression of Frasier's fatal flaw. He thinks he can talk his way out of anything. He truly thinks his intellect solves all human problems, and the thief just plays him like a fiddle. Frasier actually ends up getting arrested for disturbing the peace.
It's brilliant. Now, we have to touch on a specific quirk of Frasier that really hit its stride in Season 2. The guest caller.
The celebrity voices.
Right, you see guest caller in the credits, but you never actually see their faces. It became this massive status symbol in Hollywood. If you were anybody in the 90s, you called into Frasier.
It was the 90s equivalent of a viral cameo. It was cool precisely because it was uncredited in the moment. You had to have a sharp ear to catch it.
I have the list for Season 2 right here, and it is honestly staggering. I'm going to read a few, and I want you to tell me what this says about the show's cultural reach.
Hit me.
James Fader, Lily Tomlin, Alfre Woodard.
Serious prestige actors.
Sandra Dee, Kevin Bacon.
Yeah.
Sidney Pollack,
Actual movie stars and Oscar-winning directors?
Macaulay Culkin.
Okay, stop right there. Macaulay Culkin in 1994 was quite literally the most famous child on planet Earth. He had that Home Alone money. For him to take the time to record a tiny voice bit for a sitcom, that proves Frasier was cool. It had totally crossed over.
And the voices weren't just random. They often played brilliantly into the actor's public persona. Like John Lithgow calls in as Madman Martinez, a used car salesman who is deeply depressed.
Which is so funny because Lithgow is this grand theatrical Shakespearean actor. Hearing him play a sleazy, sad car dealer is a great inside joke for the audience.
We also had Carly Simon, Rosie Perez, Mary Steenburgen. Even Shelley Duvall calls in during the finale.
It basically turned the show into a game for the listener at home. Wait, was that Kevin Bacon? It added a whole meta layer of entertainment to the radio station scenes.
Let's go a bit deeper now. We've talked comedy, we've talked guest stars. But Frasier is ultimately a show about psychology. And Season 2 has some profoundly deep themes running underneath the farce. Specifically, Frasier's struggle with romance and authenticity.
Frasier so desperately wants love, but he is often his own absolute worst enemy. He sabotages things with his intellect.
There's the episode Slow Tango in South Seattle. Frasier finds out an old friend wrote a wildly popular book about his romantic past.
Guest starring John O'Hurley.
Frasier reads the book and is highly offended. He feels entirely misrepresented. So he tracks down his former piano teacher, the actual woman from the story, to get quote-unquote closure.
But it's not closure he wants. Let's be real. He wants validation. He wants to be told he was a good lover or a good person. He just can't let the past stay in the past.
And then there is You Scratch My Book. This one makes me cringe every single time I watch it. He dates Dr. Honey Snow, played by Shannon Tweed.
The beautiful self-help guru.
Frasier utterly despises her work. He thinks it's pop psychology drivel. Hug yourself to happiness.
But he finds her incredibly attractive, so he lies. He pretends to absolutely love her book. He even writes a glowing blurb for the jacket cover.
It's pure intellectual dishonesty just for the sake of getting laid.
It really is, and it spectacularly blows up in his face. It's the show telling us that you can't compromise your core values for romance. If you respect the mind more than anything else, you cannot date someone whose mind you do not respect, no matter how beautiful they are.
There's also a surprisingly heavy theme of class guilt in Dukes, We Hardly Knew Ye.
Which brings us right back to Martin.
Frasier and Niles, looking for a lucrative real estate investment, put money into a group that it turns out is actively demolishing Dukes.
Martin's favorite bar, his sanctuary, the place where he actually feels like he belongs.
There's a deeply uncomfortable scene where the brothers are celebrating their portfolio growth, drinking fine wine in the apartment, while Martin is quietly mourning the loss of his community hub.
It's a really brutal look at gentrification. The wealthy sons are literally destroying the working-class father's world to build a strip mall or a boutique coffee shop. It highlights that fundamental disconnect again. They aren't just annoying to Martin, their whole lifestyle is actively erasing his history.
But the show doesn't leave us in that dark place. It expertly ends the season on a very genuine note of unity. The finale. Dark victory.
This is such a great ensemble piece. It's Martin's birthday.
Man, everything goes completely wrong. The power goes out across Seattle.
The classic blackout trope. It forces everyone into one single room. It totally strips away the distractions. You can't watch TV. You can't leave the building. You just have to exist together in the dark.
Roz is there, and she's miserable because she's missing a big family reunion back in Wisconsin. She feels entirely like an outsider in the apartment.
And the resolution of that episode is basically the thesis statement for the entire series. Frasier lights a single candle. He invites Roz into the circle. He integrates her into the Crane family celebration.
It redefines family. It's not just the people you share DNA with. It's the people you share the dark with.
It cements the ensemble perfectly. By the end of season 2, Roz and Daphne aren't just the producer and the healthcare worker anymore. They are Cranes for all intents and purposes.
So let's try to synthesize all of this for you. We started this deep dive asking how season 2 actually defined the show's long-term legacy.
And I really think the answer is that season 2 proved the Frasier formula was actually sustainable. It proved you could have a show that was smart enough to win Peabodys, but silly enough to win the Nielsen ratings war.
It balanced the high culture, the opera, the expensive wine, the psychiatric jargon with the low culture, the exploding toilets, the flour sacks, the alien abductions.
And it did it with a swagger and confidence symbolized by that bold red title card. They knew they were the absolute best show on television, and they wrote like it every single week.
Before we wrap up, I want to leave our listener with a somewhat provocative thought that builds on what we've discussed. We mentioned the episode The Botched Language of Cranes earlier. Frasier makes an offhand comment on the radio about Seattle being dreary.
And the entire city completely turns on him. He becomes an absolute pariah. He can't even get a coffee without someone yelling at him in the street.
In 1994, that was just a funny plot point about the power of local talk radio. But watching it today, doesn't it feel like a totally uncanny prediction of cancel culture?
It really does. It shows exactly how quickly the mob can turn on a public figure. You are the beloved local celebrity 1 minute, and the next, you are public enemy number 1 just because of a completely minor slip of the tongue.
It raises a really interesting question for you to mull over. Is the Crane ego just timelessly fragile? Or was Frasier accidentally predicting the extreme volatility of the modern media landscape 30 years early?
I think it's probably a bit of both. But I will say this, Frasier Crane would absolutely not survive Twitter.
Oh, he would be canceled by noon on his very first day. That is it for this deep dive into Frasier Season 2. Thank you so much for listening.
Good night, Seattle.